My son-in-law's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Stop touching my car, Ethan. You're not even family here." The entire neighborhood could hear him. I stood frozen, one hand on the driver's door, heart steady, but eyes cold. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just looked at him, then silently closed the door. 5 minutes later, I was on the highway, not in his car anymore, but in my own truck, heading toward the dealership. The sun over Phoenix burned low and merciless, bleeding gold across the desert. I could still hear his words echoing, like a stain on my pride. At the dealership, I didn't even blink at the price tag. $200,000. A silver Rolls-Royce Ghost, polished like vengeance itself. When I gripped that steering wheel, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt peace. Later that afternoon, as I pulled up to the house, my new car caught every ounce of sunlight like a mirror to heaven. Earl, that's my son-in-law, was washing his precious Honda. He froze when he saw me. I gave the horn a gentle tap. The deep growl of that engine rolled through the street. He turned pale. For a second, I thought he might faint. And as he stood there speechless, I lowered the window and smiled. "Don't worry, Earl. I won't need your car anymore." But that was only the beginning. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed and tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are right now? The Arizona heat shimmered off the blacktop as I parked my Rolls in front of the house. My daughter, Roxana, stepped outside with a grocery bag in hand, confusion on her face. "Dad, what did you do?" Her voice trembled, not from anger, but disbelief. I could see it in her eyes. She knew this wasn't just about a car. It was about something deeper. Because Earl had crossed a line he didn't even see, and I was about to show him what respect really looked like. Roxana stood frozen on the porch, her eyes darting between me and the gleaming Rolls-Royce in the driveway. The reflection of the car burned gold on her face. I could almost hear her heartbeat through the silence. "Dad, please tell me you didn't actually buy that." I smiled faintly. "Cash," I said, tapping the steering wheel. "All mine." Earl came storming out before she could answer. His face looked like it was about to explode. "What the hell, Ethan? You're showing off now? You think this is funny?" He walked straight toward the car, pacing in circles like a dog marking territory. "You think you can outshine me in front of my neighbors?" I got out slowly, calm as ever. The Arizona heat pressed down, but I didn't flinch. I'd worked my entire life in it. Earl, he couldn't handle a bad day without whining. "Earl," I said, voice even, "I didn't buy this to outshine anyone. I bought it because I can." His laugh was short and ugly. "You can? You live under my roof. You eat my food." Roxana stepped between us, voice trembling. "Earl, stop it!" But he didn't. He pointed at the Rolls like it was some kind of weapon. "You want to act rich? Then act like a man and pay rent, or better yet, get your own place." That's when something shifted inside me. I didn't say it, but I thought it. I already did. Because what Earl didn't know was that the house he bragged about wasn't even fully paid off, and the down payment came from my pension. Every wall he leaned on had my sweat in it. Every bill he handled had my name printed at the bottom. I took a breath, stepped closer, and looked him in the eye. "Do you really think you're the man of this house?"
He smirked. "I don't think, old man. I know." I glanced toward Roxana. She looked away, eyes wet. My heart twisted, but I kept my calm. Then I suppose you wouldn't mind if I stopped paying the mortgage this month." The color drained from his face. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. For the first time, silence wrapped around him like a noose. I slid back into my rolls, started the engine, and watched him through the mirror. He stood there, trembling with rage, trying to keep control but failing miserably. As the garage door began to close, I saw his hand slam against the hood of his Honda. The sound echoed, and I smiled. Because that slap wasn't on his car. It was on his pride. The next morning, I found a note taped to my door. His handwriting, sharp, angry. "If you think this is over, you're wrong. You'll regret this, Ethan." I held that note for a long second, then folded it neatly and placed it on the kitchen counter. No anger, no fear, just a thought. He has no idea what's coming. Because revenge, real revenge, doesn't happen in a moment. It unfolds slowly, quietly, until the one who mocked you ends up standing on the edge of his own downfall. And by the time Earl realized what I'd set in motion, it was already too late. The next few days passed in silence, the kind of silence that sits heavy in the air. Roxana barely spoke to me. Earl moved around the house like a thundercloud, slamming doors just loud enough to make his point. I didn't rise to it. I simply went about my routine. Morning coffee, short drive in the rolls, quiet lunch, evening news. Every hum of that car engine reminded me that dignity doesn't shout, it whispers. On the third morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until the voice on the other end said, "Mr. Ethan Cole, this is Amanda from Scottsdale Federal Bank. I wanted to confirm some recent activity on your joint mortgage account." My brow lifted. "Joint account?" I repeated. "Yes, sir, the one for the property under Mr. Earl Patterson and Mrs. Roxana Patterson." I leaned back in my chair, lips curving slightly. "I'm listening." She hesitated, polite but nervous. "It seems the last payment was missed. We tried reaching Mr. Patterson, but his listed contact number is inactive. Are you still a guarantor?" Guarantor. That word hit like a forgotten echo. Yes, I was. The one who signed when they couldn't qualify on their own. The one who believed in them. The one Earl loved to call nobody. I smiled quietly. "Yes, Amanda, I'm still on it. Leave the account as is. I'll handle the arrears today." "Thank you, sir. We just wanted to make sure you were aware." "Oh, I'm aware," I said, and hung up. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the sun spilling through the blinds. He'd missed the payment, probably spent the money elsewhere, maybe on his gadgets, his golf clubs, his image. But the moment that bank called me, something in the story shifted. The house he called his was legally tied to my name. His pride was built on my foundation.
That evening, I waited in the living room when he came home. Roxana trailed behind him, carrying groceries while he barked into his phone about business. "Earl?" I said, calm and even. He didn't even look up. "What?" "Bank called today." That got his attention. He froze mid-step, the color in his face draining just slightly. "What bank?" "Scottsdale Federal. About the mortgage." He forced a laugh. "Oh, that. Just a mix-up. I'm handling it." "Are you?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because I paid it this morning." The room went still. Roxana looked at me in shock. Earl's jaw twitched. What? You paid my hour, I corrected gently. It's still under my name, remember? Seems like you forgot who made the down payment. His voice rose an octave. You think you can buy your way into respect? I stood up slowly. No, Earl. I think you should remember that respect was the only thing I never asked you to pay for. He opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked unsure, like the ground beneath him wasn't as solid as he thought. I walked to the window, watching the Rolls-Royce glint under the setting sun. Here's how this is going to work, I said quietly. I'll keep covering the house payments, not for you, but for Roxana and the kids. You'll pay me back every cent in time, and while you're doing that, maybe think about what family actually means. He didn't answer. He just stared, a mix of rage and shame twisting behind his eyes. I turned to leave the room, but stopped at the door. Oh, and Earl, I said without looking back, next time you tell someone they're nobody, make sure your name isn't sitting under theirs at the bank. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was something heavier. A silence that said the balance of power had shifted and everyone in that house felt it. Later that night, as I sat outside with a cup of coffee, Roxana came out quietly. She didn't say anything first, just sat beside me, looking at the car gleaming under the moonlight. "Dad," said Roxana softly. "Thank you." I didn't answer. I just nodded, eyes still on the horizon, because I knew something else was coming. That call from the bank wasn't the end. It was the first ripple of something much larger. And when the next call came, it wouldn't be about money. The next morning started quiet. Too quiet. Earl hadn't come down for breakfast. The coffee pot sat untouched, the air thick with unspoken things. Roxana was in the kitchen, stirring oatmeal she wasn't going to eat. The kids had already left for school. I poured myself a cup of coffee and said nothing. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the envelope on the table. Thick, white, my name printed across the front. Roxana noticed me looking. "It came for you this morning," she said softly, "from Mr. Adams' office." Mr. Adams. My attorney. The one who had handled my affairs ever since Margaret, my late wife, passed away.
I opened the envelope, unfolded the letter, and read silently. Then I smiled, small, deliberate. "What is it?" Roxana asked. "Just some old paperwork," I said, sliding it back inside. "A reminder, I guess." But it wasn't old. It was new. It was a notice to update my will, something I'd delayed for too long. And suddenly, the timing felt right. Later that day, I drove to Adams & Co., my lawyer's office downtown. The city shimmered in the desert heat, and the Rolls-Royce moved through traffic like a whisper among storms. Mr. Adams greeted me with that familiar, patient smile. "Ethan, been a while. How's life treating you?" "It's been interesting, and it's about to get more so." He chuckled. "I assume this isn't a social call." "Not quite. I need to make some changes. I want everything. My accounts, my pension, the house I'm building in Prescott Valley, to be transferred to my daughter's name, solely hers." Adams raised an eyebrow. "Not jointly with her husband?" I shook my head. "Especially not." He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen thoughtfully. "You're sure? That's going to create tension. The tension already exists. This just gives it a direction. We worked through the paperwork for nearly an hour. Signatures, clauses, and final details. When I left his office, the world outside felt lighter. For the first time in months, I was ahead of the storm instead of standing in it. That evening, I returned home. The golden dusk stretched across the street as I pulled the Rolls-Royce into the driveway. Earl was outside, watering the grass like he owned the soil. He didn't say a word when I stepped out, just glared. But I could see something different in his eyes now. Not just anger, but calculation. "Good afternoon," I said evenly. "Where were you all day?" "Just taking care of some business." He stared a moment longer, then gave a crooked grin. "You know, you act like you've got everything figured out. But trust me, old man, I always land on my feet." "I hope you do," I said, brushing past him. "You're going to need them." Inside, Roxana was waiting in the hallway, her phone in hand. "Dad," she whispered, "what's going on? Earl's been different. He's been talking on the phone all day, whispering. I think he's planning something." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the worry she tried to hide. "Don't lose sleep over it, sweetheart," I said gently. "Some people dig holes for others and forget to check how deep they're standing." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "It means that by the time he realizes what's changed, it'll already be written in ink." Her confusion deepened, but before she could ask again, the front door slammed. Earl had come inside, muttering into his phone.
Yeah, I'll handle it," he said under his breath. "He won't see it coming." He caught my eye as he walked past, and for a brief second our gazes locked, two storms meeting in silence. I didn't speak, neither did he, but we both knew what was coming. And that night, as I placed the signed copy of my new will in the safe behind my office bookshelf, I thought about something my father once told me. Revenge doesn't need anger, son, it needs timing. The house creaked softly under the desert wind. Down the hall, Earl's voice carried through the thin walls, low and restless. I poured myself one last glass of water, turned off the lights, and whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow, he'll get his first warning. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, striping the floor in gold. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of calm that comes before a storm that everyone can sense, but no one names. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and the day's mail spread in front of me. Bills, flyers, one envelope with no return address. The handwriting on it looked careful, almost polite. I slid it open with a butter knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printout of an overdue loan notice addressed to Earl Patterson. I raised an eyebrow. Someone at the bank must have sent it to my old address by mistake, or maybe not a mistake at all. Roxana came in, still half asleep. "Morning, Dad. What's that?" "Just a reminder," I said, folding it neatly. I tucked the notice into an empty envelope and wrote 2 words on the front in block letters: "Take care." No threat, no insult, just those 2 words. That afternoon, I placed the envelope on Earl's desk in the home office, right beside his computer where he couldn't miss it. Then I went out to the porch with a book and waited. An hour later, I heard the chair scrape, a drawer open, the sound of paper being torn. "What the—" He came storming out. "Did you put this here?" "Put what?" I asked without looking up. "Don't play games with me, Ethan. You trying to scare me now?" "It's a simple reminder," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "Sometimes we all need one." His face turned red. "You think you're clever, huh? Walking around with that smug grin in your fancy car? You don't scare me."
I smiled faintly. Good. Then you won't mind a little accountability. He shoved the paper back toward me, crumpled and shaking. Stay out of my business. I've been out of your business, I said quietly. It's your business that keeps walking into mine. For a long moment we just stood there. The sound of the desert wind filled the space between us. Then he turned and stalked back inside, slamming the door so hard the porch railing rattled. That night, Roxana found me in the garage polishing the rolls. "Dad," she whispered, "he's furious. He thinks you're trying to ruin him." "No," I said, setting down the cloth. "I'm trying to wake him up." She frowned. "Why do this at all?" I looked at her reflection in the car's flawless paint. Because people who live off others' pride forget what gratitude feels like. Sometimes they need to see themselves from the outside. She didn't answer, but I saw something in her eyes, a quiet understanding, mixed with fear. "He'll calm down," I said gently. "Just give him space." 2 days later, another envelope arrived. This one was from the bank again, addressed to me, not Earl. Inside was confirmation that the mortgage account had been transferred. Sole responsibility now rested with me. Earl's name had been removed after his missed payments and lack of response. He didn't know it yet. I leaned back, exhaled slowly. This wasn't revenge. This was protection, making sure Roxana and the kids had stability no matter what storms Earl created. Still, I knew what would happen when he found out. And he did, that evening. He stormed into the living room, waving a letter. "You went to the bank behind my back." "Correction, I went after your back failed to show up." His breath hitched. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said, standing. "You lost the privilege when you stopped taking responsibility."
The room went silent again. Roxana stood by the stairs, eyes wide. I reached for my coat. "If you want to build a house, Earl, start with a foundation you own. This one's not it anymore." He didn't speak as I walked out, but I could feel his stare burning through the back of my neck. Outside, the evening air was cool for once. The rolls purred to life, its reflection gliding over the windows of the house I'd once called home. I drove aimlessly for a while, until the city lights thinned and the desert opened wide. The radio murmured low. The wind slipped through the half-open window. In the mirror I could still see the house in my mind. Roxana standing strong, Earl pacing in anger, the story shifting inch by inch. A single thought ran through me. He thinks the warning was the letter, but it wasn't. The real warning was everything he hadn't learned yet, and the lesson was coming. Morning light stretched over the desert like a slow breath. I'd been awake since before dawn, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the soft hum of the city waking up. The rolls sat in the driveway, silver paint catching the first rays of sun. Inside, the house was still. Roxana had called late last night. Earl hadn't spoken a word to anyone since the argument. He'd spent hours in the garage, pacing, muttering to himself. She sounded worried, not angry. "Dad, I don't know what to do anymore." "Let him think," I told her. "Sometimes silence teaches more than words." Afternoon, I was at the construction site outside Prescott Valley. The new house was nearly finished, a small, quiet place with wide windows and a view of the mountains, my next chapter. The foreman waved as I walked up. "Morning, Mr. Cole. We're just about done here. You'll be moving in soon." "Good," I said, smiling faintly. "It's time." He hesitated. "You sure you don't want to put both your daughter and her husband on the deed?" "Just her," I replied. "If he earns his way back, he can build his own." The man nodded more than I said. That evening, back in Scottsdale, I pulled into the old driveway one last time. Roxana met me at the door. "Dad, please, he's not himself. He's been drinking coffee all day, calling people. I think he's trying to sell his car." "His car?" She nodded. "He said he needs cash fast, something about a surprise bill." I knew exactly what it was. The bank had sent him his updated balance, the one without my name attached, meaning the loan he once bragged about was now entirely his. The numbers must have looked heavier than he expected. I sighed. Let him try to fix it his way. "Dad, are you doing all this just to teach him a lesson?" "No," I said quietly. "To give him a chance to learn one." We sat in silence for a while until the front door opened. Earl walked in, holding an envelope, his hand trembling slightly. "Is this yours?" he asked, tossing it onto the table. The letter was from the bank again. He'd finally seen the new terms. "I guess it's official," he said bitterly. "You own everything." "No," I corrected. "I gave everything to Roxana." That stopped him. His eyes flicked to her, confused. "What?" "She's the legal owner now. The house, the savings, everything tied to her name. You're still her husband, but now you're standing beside her, not above her." He stared at me, words failing. For a long time, the only sound in the room was the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, he said, "Why would you do that?" "Because you needed to remember what you married. A woman with her own strength, not a shadow behind yours." Roxana's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand, but he didn't move. He just stood there, breathing hard, shoulders heavy with something that looked a lot like regret. That night, I loaded a few boxes into the rolls. Roxana followed me outside. "Dad, are you really moving out?" "I don't need you here anymore," I said. "You've got the deed, you've got the home. It's time for you two to decide what kind of family you want to be." "And Earl?" she asked softly. "He'll figure it out," I said. "He's got pride, and sometimes pride's the first step to change, if you let it burn just enough."
I smiled and handed her my house key. "If you ever need me," I said, "you know where to find me. I'll be the man with the view of the mountains." She laughed through her tears, hugging me tight. As I drove away, the city lights faded behind me. The desert opened wide, the road stretching like a promise. The radio hummed a soft jazz tune. For the first time in a long time, the silence around me wasn't heavy. It was calm. I thought of Earl, sitting in that house, realizing that respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the beginning of his own lesson. 2 weeks passed. The mountains had started to cool. Mornings were crisp, and the air smelled faintly of pine. I'd settled into the new house. Quiet, simple, peaceful. Every morning, I'd sit on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun slide up over the ridgeline. Sometimes silence has a way of fixing what words can't. One morning, as the fog lifted off the road, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A familiar car pulled up, Roxana's Honda. But it wasn't her who stepped out. It was Earl. He looked different. Not the loud, angry man I had last seen in the driveway. He was wearing the same shirt, but it hung a little looser now, like the weight inside him had shifted. He stood there for a moment, unsure if he should come closer. Finally, he walked up the porch steps. "Ethan," he said quietly, "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "You made the drive," I said, motioning to the empty chair beside me. "That's a start." He sat slowly. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the wind pushing through the pines. Finally, he took a breath. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything, about how I treated you, about the house, the car, Roxana." He paused, looking down at his hands. "I was proud, too proud. I thought I was doing everything right, being the man of the house. But the truth is, I was scared, scared of losing control, scared that you'd make me look small." I didn't interrupt. I just let him talk. "You know, when you yelled at me that day, I wasn't angry. I was disappointed, not because of what you said, but because I saw a man losing himself in his own noise. You forgot what mattered most." He nodded slowly. "I know, and I don't want to be that man anymore." I stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and looked out at the valley below. The sun was climbing, turning the world gold. I said to him, "Roxana told me you've been working late." "Yeah, took on more jobs, paid off the rest of the loan myself." He smiled faintly. "No help from anyone this time." "Good, that's how it should be." I turned back toward him. "You know, Earl, you don't owe me anything. You just owe her honesty. And if you can give her that, you've already learned everything I wanted you to." He stood up. His eyes were glassy, but his voice didn't shake. "Ethan, you taught me something. You didn't humiliate me. You didn't fight back. You just showed me what real strength looks like, and that's something I won't forget." We shook hands. Firm. Solid. For the first time, it felt like equals. Before we left, he glanced at the Rolls parked in the driveway. "That car suits you," he said with a grin. I chuckled. "You know, it's funny, I don't even drive it much anymore." "Why not?" "Because some lessons don't need to be repeated. Besides, it's not the car that matters. It's what drives you." He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that breaks tension and builds bridges. Then he nodded, climbed into his Honda, and drove off down the winding road. As the sound of his engine faded into the distance, I stood there alone again, but it felt different this time. Not lonely, peaceful. Somewhere between the silence and the sunlight, I realized something simple. I hadn't bought the Rolls for revenge. I'd bought it to remind myself and him that dignity doesn't need permission. The lesson landed, and this time it stayed.